Good morning, everyone. I'm Bill Coleman with the Benton Institute and happy to be here again this week. It's exciting to hear about the progress you all are making on your surveys. Nancy's kept me updated and glad to see that excellent progress and people really getting ready to make it happen or already making it happen. So that's an important part of this process, to get those surveys out and get as many of those back as you can and be able to make use of that data. I think it's going to be really fun for you when you start to see the responses to what is our broadband story question. Like that, as we think about our communication plans that we're talking about today, that those stories will come very much in handy to make this urgent and important issue for your community. We're lucky today to have some real experts on communications planning and implementation. Adrienne Furness and Robbie Macbeth from the Benton Institute are going to lead today's discussion about how you push that vision out that you have started creating or have created. I think we made great progress on those as well last week, to push that message out to your community. So that's our topic for today. I just wondered if there's any updates that people want to share. Bond County, anything you want to share about your efforts to date?
We've had an opportunity to also work with Southwest Illinois Leadership Council and also gather some great data from them on precision ag needs and healthcare needs and education needs. So it's good to dialogue with some local people and hear our needs and concerns in our area.
Great, sounds good. And Ogle?
Oh, I'm on? Okay. Yeah, yesterday we met and we started to put together a bigger outline of what our vision would be, goals, and also objectives.
Good, thank you.
Progress yesterday.
Great, and it's I encourage you to meet as often as you need to kind of keep up and keep the work going. And the 2 hours a week here, I used to be a Cub Scout leader, and as we recruited other leaders, we'd always say, oh yeah, it's an hour a week, and we all knew that was a lie when we said it, but it was a good hook for people that to get the work done and do a great job, you need to put the time in. So thanks for your efforts to meet and make that happen. How about Livingston?
Mike? I don't believe we have an update at this time.
Okay.
We'll use today as our update meeting.
Very good. And Kaskaskia?
Yes, our survey is in its final review with Nancy, and I met with the Clinton County Board last evening, and they are 100% behind our initiative. And I think we are ready to roll.
Great. Peoria Woodford.
We launched yesterday. We did a media conference and had TV coverage of the launch, and we'll be doing several social media posts that will come out as part of that. So we have about 100 responses so far today.
Oh, excellent. Way to go. Thank you. And Kankakee and CDC.
We've finalized our survey, and we'll be looking at distributing that pretty soon. And also our vision statement has been finalized.
Great. Thanks for that great progress. Good. So with that, let's go to Adrienne Furness, who's going to lead us through today's learning and work exercise. Adrienne?
Thank you, Bill. And I have to tell you how much I love your shirt. That's a nice thing to
I said the same thing. That's two, Bill. That's two compliments.
I know. It's about a $9 shirt from Jamaica, from a little hut, in the...
I was going to say, it's no place that I live near, but anyway, thank you. Listen, before we start, Bill, why don't we tell everybody that today we're actually publishing and releasing an Accelerate guidebook. And so maybe Robbie, at some point when I'm gabbing and you're in between slides, you can post it. You guys will get a little sneak preview. And this is a guidebook that explains the process that you all are undergoing. And it's a place where the worksheets live, and some nice sidebar stories from the work so far in that Bill has conducted in Minnesota and Illinois. And we'll update the guide with six Robbie for being started our Accelerate program in Ohio yesterday. So we have more and more communities doing this, and I really want to commend the author, Bill Coleman, and the Benton team for working to get this out. So a really fine piece of work from Bill. And I think if you all want to refer to it, it's just going to be a great tool. So thank you for that, Bill, and to the team and to everybody else here on the call who we're learning from as we write and release stories about this program. So Robbie, let's start with the slides. Great, thank you. So today, we're really going to talk to you about how you organize your team around common goals, strategies, and messages. And Bill had asked me to speak today in part because of the kind of communications and messaging work that Benton does and our national policy work. And so first we're going to, next slide, Robbie. First, we're going to really do a quick review of the webinar. You know, I know it's sometimes hard to do your homework, so I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I do want to get everybody up on the same page as we start. So some of you today, including Kankakee, talked about finalizing your vision statement. And so it's really important that you define what your community looks like when you're successful. And I always like to say a vision statement is an elevator pitch. So think about standing in an elevator and a stranger saying, well, what do you do? And you say in literally a minute and a half, what your purpose is, what your vision is, and articulate it in a way that is very clear to an audience of I would call non-believers or people who don't know enough about broadband. So you really try to use words, as Bill says, that are meaningful, but also understandable to neophytes who may not be in this broadband fight on a day-to-day basis. You want to identify who, of course, outside of your team, could be a passionate champion to propel that vision. So we talk about building relationships in the communities. We obviously heard today that Kaskaskia had the meeting with the Clinton County Board last night. Obviously, maybe identifying somebody on that board who starts to catch the bug. But the point is, as you reach out to do your surveys, you're going to be talking to people in the community and trying to find and enlarge the current team that's on this call, people who can help you, again, with your vision, achieving your vision and propelling your project. We do want you to recognize in a sort of SWOT analysis, what are your challenges and opportunities? What's working in your favor? What things do you need to overcome? And be aware of those. And as you look at your milestones, which are your smaller outcomes that can build toward this bigger vision, you want to try to look at the things that you need to overcome, and you want to look at the things that support your project as ways to reach your milestones, and again, communicate those to people. Next slide, Robbie. So a lot of people want to jump straight to tactics. We'll get there and I'll talk to you about this, but it's absolutely clear that for each milestone, you want to think through a communications and influence strategy and talk about who are the decision makers that can help you reach each milestone. So if it's the county board, the school superintendent, the local mayor, a representative, somebody who can pull a lever to help you realize your goals. You want to be aware again of what outside factors might influence those decision makers. Maybe there is an overarching economic development goal. Maybe there is the need to propel tourism in your county. And so people don't like to go on vacation generally without decent Wi-Fi or cellular service. But there are going to be factors that are going to motivate people to get on your team. And then, you know, nobody likes to be alone in this game. So decision makers tend to, there's a cascade of, they tend to, you know, one person, the dominoes fall, and then it sort of kind of propels itself forward as more and more people get on board. And so start with the decision maker that is easiest for you to reach, or someone who could become an advocate for you. Robbie, next slide. These are the tactics. As I said, a lot of people jump right to this. What is my social media strategy? What am I going to put out flyers? Am I going to do a webinar? Am I going to hold a community gathering? But we really urge you to do the work up front before you get here. So again, have that elevator pitch, understand what your challenges and opportunities are, identify your targets before you get to this stage. And then you'll find that these tactics will become far more effective. Everybody is on the same page and nobody's contradicting each other, because division in messaging is often a way for people who want to challenge your effort to divide you. So it's very important, I think, to be united as you move forward with some of these tactics. Robbie, thank you. So each message or messaging in general should have 4 components. You need to, again, think about your need or opportunity. Many of you in your vision statements have talked about that. You want to obviously specify what you are doing in this effort. You're trying to bring affordable broadband to your community. That is exactly, you know, the what of what you are doing. How you were doing it, you'd be saying, I'm working with my community, I'm working with my providers. I've conducted a survey to figure out how broadband is used in my community. And again, we want to make sure that everybody has got the elevator pitch down on the vision statement and is saying that like a mantra over and over again. Robbie, next slide. So I'm going to talk about a specific project that Benton did to just put some flesh on the bone and give you an example of the kind of process that Benton goes through with our major publications, and a process we're actually undergoing right now as we release the Accelerate document. So this is a national agenda that Benton released in October 2020. There was a predecessor document released in 2019, but COVID changed, as you all know, so much that we felt that we needed to put some urgency on the national agenda and renamed it. Instead of a vision for the 2020s, we put some urgency in the title and talked about Broadband for America Now. Now, I think that before I get into this, many of you know Benton only through the programs that we're doing in Illinois, but the bulk of our work is aimed at national policymakers trying to create the right climate for state and local policymakers to implement broadband to better their communities. So we spend a lot of time at the Federal Communications Commission, at the Department of Commerce's NTIA, that's the group that's releasing the $42 billion for broadband infrastructure at the US Department of Agriculture. And so we sort of make our way around Washington and the halls of Congress, really outlining in 2020 what we thought was important. And so our vision statement was to ensure that everyone in America can use high performance broadband as soon as possible, that's the now, to achieve a more just America, a healthier society, and an economy that offers true opportunity for everyone. So obviously lots of things going on when we released this. The Black Lives Matter movement was starting. We obviously had COVID. The economy was frankly not a great place. And so we, as always, don't look at broadband as a means to an end. I mean, it is a means to an end. It's not the sole reason for why all of us on this call want to bring broadband to our communities. Next, Robbie. So the team that we put together was obviously our board of directors. It's a working board, so a lot of people in the broadband space, our staff, and then we have fellows and legal experts that are sort of work for us part-time and help us carry the water on our messaging. But then more importantly, we have a series of allies around the country who believe in this broadband for all philosophy. And this even includes many of the providers in our space who may be motivated by different things than we are, but who obviously their business model is about getting broadband out to as many people as possible as well. The primary audience for our report was federal, state, and local government officials, but our secondary office really was about reaching out to other groups like philanthropy, because we want their involvement, anchor institutions, so that's healthcare, libraries and schools, and other such influencers on federal policy. And as I said before, the climate really of COVID created what we call this broadband moment. But I think it also overwhelmed and delayed implementation because people were so focused on the emergency. They really implemented short-term fixes that now we think, when Bill's talked about this, probably slowed the process. So everybody getting all those hotspots out, may have solved the problem in the short term, but because of data caps and other issues of connectivity, those aren't great long-term solutions. Okay, Robbie, go ahead. So we had 5 messages, and we look at these as interconnected. You really can't do one without all the others. So we called it a comprehensive broadband strategy. And I won't read through these because the slides will be delivered. But obviously, digital equity is something we talk about. A lot of people use the word digital opportunity, but it's really this overall concept that once you reach low-income, unserved, and underserved populations, and you give them not only devices, but the training and digital skills that allow them to make the best use of their connections, this will contribute to a more equitable society. I mean, we look at access to the internet as a civil right. Deployment, a lot of areas, as you all know on this call, are saddled with second-rate broadband, and there's really no need to have that happen with the broadband infrastructure investment, particularly that is to come. We need to really be focused on trying to get broadband to unserved and underserved areas. We view that a lot of the problems of not being able to get broadband to everyone is a failure of competition. So 4 broadband providers in this country have about a 96% share of subscribers. And many people, including myself, really only have access to one or two providers. We're big believers that if a third or fourth provider gets into the market, it does a lot to help with lowering prices and increasing customer service and improving broadband itself. So in those markets where there are 3 or 4 providers, we're very happy about that. Now, in some instances, a market can't sustain that kind of competition. But then really, this is why communities have to be involved in creating their own goals, establishing relationships with a provider that chooses to be in their area and can be responsive to their requests and vision for broadband in their community. So if competition doesn't exist, sometimes it doesn't, because, as I said, the market just can't economically sustain more than one player. Community anchor institutions are incredibly important broadband is used to fulfill their missions, but these institutions can also reach users wherever they are, and they can serve as launching pads for community-wide access. So this is everything from a library opening up their Wi-Fi so that people after hours could sit in the parking lot, to now the Federal Communications Commission, through their ECF program, actually allowed schools to provide devices and also to provide service to the surrounding areas where students didn't have it. Obviously, we think state and local leadership is incredibly important. The feds are sitting in Washington. They're not necessarily know what's going on locally, but feds can give the money. And so the money combined with trusted state, tribal and local leadership really is the best combination. And so that's why we do work on in the local level to try to fuse all of these approaches together. Robbie, next slide. Thank you. So our milestones, we each principle that we put forward attached specific recommendations for implementation. And then our fellows and staff worked with our allies, so people who are other public interest organizations, to make sure that they were sort of singing from the same hymnal. And we found, much to our pleasure and not so much surprise, because we were working super hard with our allies, that a lot of what we asked for appeared in the 4 major bills that were passed in 2020 and 2021. And many of the principles in the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act really came right out of our Broadband for America Now. Actually, our report was cited by the GAO, that's the General, sorry, I always forget what the abbreviation, Robbie, is for GAO, but it's sort of the big oversight commission, and they cited our report amongst several others. That
Government Accountability Office.
Oh, thanks, Robbie. The Government Accountability Office. That's the people who breathe down the necks of all the agencies and say, are you being effective? But they cite our report as one of 5 that has had a big effect on the IIJA and some of the agenda moving forward. Next slide. So our tactics, obviously, we didn't do these before we had created our vision and our principles. So I wrote an editorial to communicate that vision. We released the report in a number of different forms so people could grab, either read the full thing or a separate document that was just the policy recommendations. We also created a document that we didn't do this alone. We relied on the research and work of a lot of other organizations around the country, and we wanted to tout their work as well in the agenda that we put out. We created a landing page on our website, and Robbie implemented social media campaigns. That's what he does for us, among other things, to drive people to this page and amplify our messaging. As I said, we recognize champions. We talked about the organizations and people that we interviewed through this process and that informed our thinking. We compiled those contributions, as I said, in an appendix. And then we used this group, and I say used in the nicest way, we used this group to ask them to take the report to their personal networks, to support the agenda on their social media channels. And obviously, we reached into these groups who hold their own conferences, panel opportunities, and they asked the author and other people associated with Benton to come in and talk about the agenda. So we were in Washington, D.C. at the Schools, Health, Libraries, Broadband Coalition Conference. We were at Broadband Communities. So we met the National Digital NDIA. That's the sort of group for everybody who's concerned about equity and the participants who do that on the ground. So we found a lot of different opportunities to get our message across. We obviously worked the press and gave interviews and posted that press on our website. So the person who said that they launched with TV and social media, I think that was Peoria Woodford. You want to make sure that if you create a landing page or a website for your effort, that you have links to those kinds of press validation that you've worked hard to gather. Obviously, part of the strategy was getting out there and having meetings specifically with administration officials. In the case of our document, this was a transition from the Trump administration to the Biden administration. So we met with transition staff at Commerce, particularly to talk about the agenda. We have congressional champions who are interested in pushing broadband for all. So we met with their staff, including House Majority Whip Clyburn and his staff, Edward Markey and his staff. And so we were able to find people who were sympathetic and also going to be champions for us and trying to push the broadband bills through. Obviously, again, Federal Communications and NTIA, we met with them a lot over those ensuing months. And then Robbie writes an ongoing Broadband for America Now newsletter. And this essentially sends updates to the people who signed up and who we identified during the process. And we continue to communicate with them about other reports that we write that drill down on some of the issues. Some of the groups here have talked about middle mile networks. We're big believers in that because it makes it easier for providers to build last mile service to residences and businesses. So we try to continue the work, continue to speak about it, and essentially Benton's mission is to make sure that all those recommendations that we have in the report are fulfilled over time. Next, Robbie. So Robbie's now going to talk about the work that we did in Illinois Connected Communities and also during our first cohort of Accelerate to put a more local spin on these communication strategies.
Great. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Adrienne. So yeah, the first slide here I'm going to be talking about is from the Illinois Connected Communities program, which is similar to the Accelerate program. But it's longer and it's about kind of approaching digital equity a little bit more holistically. So focusing on things like adoption and use of broadband. So making people aware of low cost internet options and other things. And so I just wanted to highlight a few different communication strategies that ended up being very successful to show things that you could replicate among your own communities, and two, just to give you an idea of the diversity of options at the table for things that communities can decide to do. So Mercer County and Flanagan both kind of decided to basically name their team, the Mercer County Internet Initiative and Connect Flanagan, respectively. Even though, especially in the Connect Flanagan case, that was about 2 or 3 people kind of starting that thing. So it might seem odd to sort of name this initiative, even though there's only 2 people, but it ends up, being really effective and serving as kind of a flag that people can kind of identify and go underneath. And so with respects to Flanagan, they utilized Facebook really well because the village of Flanagan, extremely small area in central Illinois, where Facebook was the main avenue that people were using to communicate with one another and find out what is going on in the town. That may be true for areas within your counties, that may not, but they found tremendous success with people identifying that we're able to be on Facebook. Yeah, I'm having really bad internet service problems, and that wanted to join and be a part because they saw their messaging via Facebook. I wanted to like really hammer home the point about social media, which is, I think a lot of people instinctively think, oh, we just got to kind of like do as much as we can on social media. I think that is great when you're doing sort of like push items around getting more people to take the survey, or if you want to hear from your community about, different things. But an important thing to keep in mind is it's not often, Adrienne had mentioned, who are the key players to move you towards your milestones? Who are the influential stakeholders? Social media often is not the place, to get your economic development council to rethink something, or to bring, some like the mayor on board for a problem. It's mostly about kind of mobilizing people and finding out, problems in your community around connectivity. So I'm sure we'll talk about it more, but I just wanted to put that point out there about social media. But yeah, you can see, I'll move on to the next point. So we heard, already there was some counties working with the Leadership Council in Southwest Illinois. They have been such a powerhouse with different Illinois broadband programming of just that region. And so when they were in the initial Illinois Connected Communities cohort, they really, they had so many people, it was such a large area that they were able to divide into subgroups around different topics. And through that, they were able to present at so many different events, whether it be meetings of councilmen, or hosting their own broadband summit, which is another thing that we're going to be talking about. So actually bringing together city officials, those kind of key stakeholders that know, economic development or infrastructure assets and those sorts of things, and connecting them with providers that are looking to expand the area. You wouldn't believe, just getting those people into the same room, how quickly certain challenges and obstacles can kind of go away or be overcome. So those broadband summits themselves, I think, should be thought of as a key piece in a communications strategy. And it was really effective for the Southwest Leadership, Council, because you kind of think each of those broadband summits kind of like furthers the message around, and you can kind of have as many as you want. And so one of those diagrams there is Mercer County, who also did a broadband summit. And so, that kind of gives you a preview of something to be thinking about as you all think, kind of long-term about your communication strategy. You all are going to be doing this broadband survey and getting some data. You can use that to ultimately drive the conversation further and say, hey, anybody that's interested in looking at the data and the stories that we've collected from this broadband survey, come to this broadband summit. We can have a Q&A session about it. You can learn a little bit more about the plan, that sort of thing. Lastly, the city of Harvey, which is in kind of southwestern Cook County, southwest of Chicago, they have a history of being a major industrial train area, community, freight line. And so they, had city developers and economic developers on their team, and really ended up kind of weaving their whole broadband plan into their economic development report titled Trucks, Trains, and Technology. And so their communication strategy definitely went from, this is kind of an isolated thing that we're trying to solve with broadband towards, let's actually weave this in together with the understanding of if we're going to be a place in which, you know, businesses come here because of our freight capabilities, we can also be a place because of our fiber connections, and anybody that's doing, you know, fast data delivery or needs sort of fast data can be incorporated into that. So that's another thing that to keep in mind is, you know, do we want to be weaving our broadband vision into other larger countywide initiatives, communication initiatives. And then unfortunately my notes, I don't know if anyone else deals with this issue of dual screens and things getting whatever. So I'm not able to access my notes on Accelerate Round 1. So I'm going to go a little bit from memory here, but at least on this slide, we have Connect Whiteside. And so Whiteside County was a participant in the last round of Accelerate. And we thought their messaging was just so simple and effective. They ended up putting together their own website. And so this is a screenshot of the website that you can go to. They have their own logo and name of their initiative. You go to the website and it says, take the survey, you know, and it has that option in Spanish. So immediately they could just say, you know, if they were anywhere, go to the Whiteside County website, which is just, you know, the streamlined communications approach of that is so effective. And nowadays you could use QR codes if you wanted to get them land there. And then it says here, if you or someone you know does not have internet service, please complete a paper survey available at, and then, you know, it further lists places to drop off your survey data. So this was just an extremely effective way to, you know, show what they're trying to do with Connect Whiteside and get their survey out to as many people as possible. And then I put their vision statement, which also appears on the website, which is Connect Whiteside envisions an equitable deployment and use of robust, affordable broadband infrastructure that improves the quality of life and competitiveness of every resident, business, and organization in Whiteside County. Just really holistic, equitable, kind of capturing everything. And that kind of simplicity just, I think, helps people, you know, really click into what Connect Whiteside is doing. I had other examples from round 1, but the one that I know that I worked on was with Knox County. And they kind of went back and forth on their vision statement. And something that I thought was interesting was they landed on this notion of like wanting Knox County to be a desirable place to live. Their team was composed of economic developers, a couple of people from the school district and other things. And the unifying kind of goal of the community was they were a location that, you know, wanted to attract more families and businesses to the area. And also we're dealing with the fact that there were some people moving out, particularly with the pandemic and everything else. And so they were really focused on kind of increasing their population and that sort of thing. And so they focused their broadband vision statement around that and sort of had that goal of, okay, any sort of region in our county that's focused on attracting businesses or attracting potential home buyers, we're going to have, you know, ensure that the broadband vision is communicated with them so that they can see. So that was really effective. And then I just wanted to share a couple of notes, final things on some of the tactics, because again, I think that's where everyone's mind jumps to. And I think Adrienne did make the point very well. If there's a lot of prep work that goes on and just hard work that goes on before you actually go to the tactics. But moving to the tactics, definitely keep in mind in-person outreach, which I know is still a challenge in this kind of pandemic, post-pandemic era. But when you really think about, are we hearing from people that either are unserved and have no broadband access at all, or underserved? You know, often the internet is not a place to hear from them. So social media, you know, may exist for people that are cell phone only, who are on Facebook and able to post, but there are a lot of people, particularly seniors, particularly low income populations, particularly, you know, other socioeconomic groups that do not have access to make their voice heard. You know, that's kind of one of the hard catch-22s of doing this broadband work. So all that to say, when you are trying to communicate your vision, really do not underestimate in-person events. There's been a lot of success around grocery stores and libraries, obviously, as two major. And then there's a lot of groups here talking about telehealth. And so hospitals themselves, you know, is a fantastic place where if you're looking to try to expand telehealth, getting hospitals on board early with that and kind of explaining internet options for people there, you know, can just be a tremendous avenue. The other one is door knocking. I don't remember which community it was. Someone can chime in if they remember, but they ended up knocking on something like 500 doors out of like 700 or something in their community, and saw an enormous response rate with the survey, because they basically knew, okay, there's only so many households in this community. We know they don't have adequate internet. So if we can just knock on their door, explain our program and communicate with them, we can really get high survey numbers, which they did. And to get that level of granular service or survey data, where you're literally having people either, do the broadband tests in that such a small area, that's a gold mine for any potential provider that wants to expand in that area, because they can know exactly, okay, who does and who doesn't, down to the household level.
So Robbie, the two communities were the village of Elsa that did the
Yes.
door knocking, and then Flanagan got
Mhm.
500 surveys for a population of about 1,000 people through
Yes.
that tactic. So those were the two that did that. So I agree with Robbie. Don't underestimate just the solid strategy of literally in a small community, just getting in front of people in their residences.
And yeah, you're reminding me too. I'm pretty sure the other reason Flanagan saw tremendous success in their survey response rate was water bill information, which has come up, I know, at least in my group and other communities in the Accelerate program, which if you have any sort of relationship to any
Utility.
utility organization that's sending a water bill out to everybody, where people are checking that and paying that often via mail, having something that explains, what you're doing, either take this speed test or, information about what your community is trying to do, can be tremendous. And then lastly,
that was Flanagan.
yeah, so that's just something else to keep in mind, is what are the communication channels in our community. Last two things I just wanted to talk about, local media and radio programming. I did not know was so often in certain communities so huge, where everybody is listening. I'm from Chicago, and so there's just like a million radio stations, and it's so diversified that it's obviously still an effective media channel. But in other places across Illinois, it's kind of like, oh, particularly farmers, like everybody's sort of tuned into this radio station. And if it's in their interest, radio and the farming community, to have those ads or interviews out there, that can be really, really successful. So I know Kyle from Mercer County, frequently was on the radio with his great radio voice, talking about their initiatives in Mercer County. And then, so radio, local media, obviously, and then schools. They sort of have their own way of communicating with parents and channels, but teachers, I think, especially these last few years, know more than anybody people's home broadband situation. If they know exactly, which students often do or do not have broadband at home. And so tapping into your school district, not only, to reach out to families and do your general work, but also as a communication resources. We had communities that had flyers that went home with students, to inform parents about the affordable connectivity program. Because with that program, free and reduced lunch, is often a pre-qualifier for those sorts of things. So if you can kind of tap into those channels, that can be really successful. So that's all from me, I think. Let me just make sure. Yes. And so this is, I believe, the part of the worksheet that you'll be working on.
So this is up. This is a guide for you all to use in the breakout rooms. We've sort of, this is something that we got from a professional communications firm called Spitfire Strategies, a group that many groups in Washington work with. And so it just helps you. There are more than one page on this, but I think there's 3, maybe 6 boxes altogether, but it gives you sort of a chance to work through some of the things that we've talked about today. So obviously, if you've written your vision, there you go. You talk about the team. Yesterday, it was a very interesting initial conversation with the people in our Ohio communities saying, well, do we have the right team members? Do we need to reach out to other people? My group in particular had no agricultural representatives. So if there's Farm Bureau or Illinois Soy Association or the equivalent in Ohio, we ask the question, if you're going to get the survey out, are there people on your team that can help facilitate that, like school superintendents? And then there are other boxes down that, and I don't think we have those, Robbie, but they're in the folder that you all can access when you do your breakout rooms. Then there are other series of questions that revolve around the presentation and around the webinar that you watched. So Bill, we're finished a tiny bit early. Is there anything you would like to add?
I think you guys did a great job. I think looking at this in bite-sized pieces and not jumping too fast to the solution,
Right.
to take the time to do the work and then work the plan. I think that's, and so I would, as you go through this process, I would really focus on creating a pretty detailed plan. Even if you think, oh, well, we know everyone, we know everything in our community, let's kind of wing it, and I have to, some of us are wingers and some of us are planners, but I think to go into that planning mode a little bit, because I think you'll find by doing that, you'll find some great new ideas that wouldn't necessarily be so apparent and some great connections. So as we know, in many rural places, that informal network is so powerful. And so to make use of that, and I think Adrian's point about her big national strategy around broadband, she knows who her allies are. And so make good use of your allies on this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you can't carry the water by yourself. As I said, if you have, for instance, we know we were not experts in particular parts of the agenda. And so we reached out to people to have them carry the messaging forward to their particular constituents. So healthcare is something that, is not an area that Benton does a lot of work in, whereas we tend to spend a little more time on the library side because it's traditionally been so tied to digital equity and has been the public computing center, for decades. As Bill says, they're our best friends in the fight for digital equity. And we actually wrote an article today going back to the ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, that says that there is more ACP sign up in towns and areas where there is a local public library. So I think we see that institutions can play a significant role, as Robbie said, whether you put a table in there for surveying or other reasons. That's a way to use your allies and people. When you perceive that as a weakness in your own staff, your knowledge base, etc., have somebody else do the work.
Yeah, in one of our first Accelerate communities in Kanabec County in East Central Minnesota, they had a county commissioner who votes no on everything. And so in his area was the least served with broadband. And so they made sure that they got hundreds of surveys from his district. So that in all those stories, again, that as people come in and submit the surveys, they use those stories, they use those strong survey results that, yes, broadband was important, even in the most rural parts of this rural county. And they turned him into a believer who made the motion to spend money, which probably the first time in his career he did that. So, and the final thing I'd say is just remember, it's not just a message, it is the messenger. And so as you think about the right people to deliver that message, whether to an audience like farmers or whether it's to a particular person in a leadership role, I think that really matters. Good. Any questions or comments from teams out there? Or any reflections on how you're already doing this or your thoughts you came up with? I think this is very much tied to the survey distribution and getting that word out. Any thoughts on how this is making sense to you, or how you think you're already doing this well? Marty, I see your smiling face there from Livingston. What's your reaction?
A lot of the stuff we've discussed, and it's just a matter of getting the information out, getting the implementation, and getting the information back so that we can start working on people and start working on relationships to get this moving in the direction that we want it to go.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry George Evans isn't on the call, because I do want to recognize that I think George told me he made 80 community presentations.
I'm here,
Oh,
Adrian.
you are there. Oh my God, in your car. How many presentations did you make, George?
Over 60. I'm in a bad Wi-Fi area in the Gulf, but 60
Right.
was what we did.
Yeah, it was a lot, and I think you learned a lot from that. But let me tell you, they cannot say that people in that 9-county region don't know that this is a problem anymore. So that was great. So
Yeah.
and again, it was a 9-county region. You know, we don't expect a small county to be doing 60 presentations, but in that particular case, when you're dealing with a 9-county region, and the Leadership Council played a huge role and had partners in the in various organizations that played a huge role, including Scott Air Force Base and the Urban League and a bunch of other PCs for people down there. So there were a lot of people involved, and George was head of that education committee. So he was the one in charge of lassoing, everybody in the education community around the issue too. So
Adrian, we could also
Adrian, we also had success with, we did over 30 editorials too,
Right.
between us and the Leadership Council. We got a lot of editorials out.
Right. Thank you. Yeah. So, again, it's going to be fun to get into this Kaskaskia group, and they've learned something from their enrollment in ICC. But a lot of you haven't gone through a previous Illinois program, but obviously give you plenty of examples and best practice efforts in your rural areas, whether it's financing a new library or another economic development strategy. So we find that sometimes you keep going back and tapping the same people and over again, but that's actually an advantage because you already have a way to mobilize people who really care about where they live.
maybe Kathy could talk about her experience in Tazewell County, where she and Grace went out to so many of the township meetings. Kathy, are you there to share?
Yeah, so Grace and I both attended city council meetings, and that was a great way to connect with the key leaders in the communities. I think that helped to carry it forward and really stimulate that engagement. I think chambers of commerce were also a really strong partner. So all of our chambers posted frequently the reminders about participating in the survey process, and then all the other partners that you've mentioned. So yeah, I think that building those relationships with those communities, because the service varies so much from one community to the other, was important.
Yeah, good. Thank you, Kathy. I think as we think about this, of course, this communications plan isn't just related to the surveys, it's related to the entire initiative. And so I think as you think about that, you're really trying to shape, not just inform, but hopefully educate and shape public opinion about how important this is. So it's kind of not just informing, but influencing is really important. So good. So I think
I have a question.
Yes.
Yes, there was a time in my life when the word digital was very confusing to me, and I was a graphic designer, and then digital became understood, and today the word digital equity meant something very valuable for me when you talk about broadband. Because broadband, the thing itself, it doesn't really give an understanding of what are you asking for. I mean, is there anybody who's in opposition to broadband? That's the question.
You know, that is a great question, and I think that everyone wants, when we do our surveys, you know, the answers always come back, we want faster broadband at lower prices with more reliability, right? We want it all, of course. But I think what is important is to message out about the important role that the community has in making sure that the broadband is adequate to support all the things we do with broadband. And so whether we've talked about that 100 times already, the education, the working from home, the healthcare, the social communication. And so with the broadband is falling short, and that's why all of us are on these calls, because there's plenty of that. How do we convince the community to take action, to become engaged, you know, at a variety of levels, from cheerleader to owner of a network? And so I think that's where we're really trying to message out to the community. Once you've set your visions and decided what it is you'd like to accomplish, to let the rest of the community know, so it just doesn't, you know, it's not just 10 people in a room working to try and get better internet service. It becomes the main topic in the grocery store line for county commissioners. So instead of potholes and drainage ditches or whatever else the issue of the day is, that broadband is high in people's minds.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Good question. Good. We're gonna, Robbie, right? People have a link to the worksheet now in the chat.
Yeah, I put the new one in. Is that all right? The
Oh yeah, sure.
polished, clean one.
I know, beautiful. So so I would encourage folks to download that and go into the groups and work through that. And you know, I think if you focus in on a particular, not try and create your whole plan today, but kind of go through the process on a particular thing, whether that's a survey or kind of, you know, whatever objective it is, promoting the vision statement, and then work through that, and then just use that as a model. And if you want to then spend time on your vision statements, or if you need to talk about your surveys, you know, this hour is really your own to run as you see fit to get the best progress that you can. So, but spend a little bit of time on this communications planning.
I've also just added the older version in Word doc. So if that is, you know, if you want the whole Word or the older thing, you can use that. So up to you, either the shiny new PDF or the older Word doc.
Okay, good. So Nancy, if you want to, if there's no questions or other comments from the communities, we'll go into our rooms.
Thank you all for your kind attention. Looking forward to the breakouts.